Hello and welcome to Beach View, our podcast where we talk about different things.
Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about Star Wars. Star Wars. That sounds funny when I say it.
Nice sound effect there. You got a little music sting for it.
Yeah, I felt like it was appropriate.
Oh, yeah, it's a monumental film. So,
It is. And, why don't you tell us a little bit about Star Wars?
So, it's a 1977 sci-fi fantasy film, written and directed by George Lucas. It was originally released as just Star Wars, but then later retitled to Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. So, I figured we could first get into a bit of, our history with it. So, I watched this film as a kid first, and then watched all of them that were out at the time. And then, rather recently, because Bree, who isn't here, but was supposed to be here, I watched them with her, the whole series.
Oh, that was nice of you. So, for me, it was kind of a badge of honor that I had never seen one Star Wars movie. And my husband hadn't either. And so we were like the only people in the world that exist who have never seen Star Wars. So I understand a little bit of the pop culture around it just because I've heard people talk about it through the years. But I've never actually watched Star Wars. I knew George Lucas had done it. I knew Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill and all those people were in it, but I didn't know anything about it besides pop culture references, and even some of those I didn't understand. So this was my very, very first viewing of Star Wars Episode 4. So it was a monumental time in my life to watch Star Wars.
See, yeah, I feel like now I've ruined it for you. You've now watched it. You ruined your badge of honor.
I know. Well, even Travis was like, wait, you really gonna watch this? We said we were never gonna watch it. It was we were the only people who had never seen it, and we were gonna keep it that way. And I'm like, well, all good things must come to an end, So he watched it with me. We watched it last night. So it was very exciting.
Alright, so yeah, I thought that was, that's kind of why I picked it. Not just because, someone who hasn't seen the big thing hasn't seen it, but I think, this film is genuinely important to the history of cinema and American pop culture. I know a lot of people consider this to be the start of the modern blockbuster era, along with Jaws a few years prior. And, obviously it spawned a whole series of, the movies that come after it, and it had a ton of, toys and other merchandise, shirts and what have you. It spawned a whole expanded universe of, books and comics and games, and it became, this whole cultural phenomenon, and I think a lot of other, media properties sort of followed in its footsteps.
I agree. Definitely. Which is why it's so surprising that I've never seen it, so it was just kind of one of those things. I was I don't know anything about it, but knowing its importance on, like I said, pop culture and on cinema and on all these other things, I'm just surprised that this is the first time I watched it. So, yeah. Well, do you want to give us a little kind of synopsis of the plot?
Okay, so you want to save your thoughts till after I give a synopsis?
I mean, it's up to you. You want me to get into it now?
Sure, yeah. Because I want to see, what you thought of it. Was it worth the wait?
Okay, so I went into this knowing that, it was done in the 70s, late 70s, and it was this whole, cultural phenomenon, and assuming that, you really need to watch, all of them in order to get, the full effect. So this was my first foray into it. And so I watched the first movie last night, and I was kind of what did I just watch? I was kind of what the heck is this? It was so like off the wall to anything like I have seen. And granted, like I'm not like a sci-fi aficionado, so this was kind of like, where did this come from? Like, and also, side note, what was George Lucas smoking when he like wrote this? I was just kind of like cracking up the whole time because I was just like, wait, what is this creature? And what is that little spaceship thing? And like, what is all of this? Like, it was so bizarre to me, just like not knowing anything about it. I mean, really, besides, like I said, some references. And then watching it, I was like, this is what all the talk is about. So it was definitely eye-opening. I will say that, you know, I've said this many times before that, like, I enjoyed the creativity of it, but the whole time I was like, wait, what is this? You know, like, it was kind of comical because the whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, what just happened? Who are these people? Like, what is this person? You know, like, everything was like a different creature, and it was just like, I feel like I really need to watch it again because, like, the first one was, like, kind of shock and awe. And then, you know, and then, like, I feel like I need to watch it again to, like, reabsorb it. So that was my initial reaction to it. Like, what the heck is this? Like, it's just so many different things in one movie. That's kind of how I felt. What did you think?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, because I feel like you probably had what was maybe a typical reaction and when this came out in theaters.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but I really did not know anything besides, like, okay, somebody named Han Solo was in it, and that was Harrison Ford. And I actually thought Harrison Ford's character was Luke Skywalker. Like, I didn't know he was Han Solo. Like, yeah, so I knew, like, Princess Leia, you know, and I've heard of, like, R2-D2. In fact, like, when the little, like, droid characters first came on, I was like, is one of those called, like, R2-D2 or something? Like, it was, like, a latent memory in the back of my mind. So I knew, like, a couple of, like, names, like Jabba the Hutt and, like, Obi-Wan Kenobi, but I didn't know at all, like, what those were referencing, like, at all. So it was just very funny because I'm just shocked that I've gone this far in life without understanding any of the references, you know?
Yeah.
It was, like, all new to me. So do you remember, like, the first time you watched it?
Oh, God. So, I mean, I definitely wouldn't have had that reaction because I was a kid. So, you know, like, it's...
Yeah.
like, that, you know, like, just weird aliens or spaceships and whatnot, you know, like, registered to me as, like, oh, that's weird. Where is this coming from?
Yeah. I guess as a kid it's different, you know, but, I really was, like, I was trying to follow it, like, okay, like, oh, are we in a different galaxy now? Like, why are there space wars happening? Like, you know, and it was just like a whole, like I said, shock and awe. It was like, what? I was trying to follow it. Like, it was funny. I also, like, wanted to note that I felt like the part, like, near the end where they were, like, flying through space and, like, having, like, shootouts, I felt like that was kind of a long section. Like, all right, you know, like, I felt like it was, like, a car chase scene in, like, a modern movie. You know what I mean? Like, where you're like, okay, like, they're shooting each other. Like, let's move on, you know? But anyway, and I thought, like, the end was different. Like, I thought, you know how, like, you always hear, like, Darth Vader going like, Luke, I am your father, like something like that. Like, I thought that was in it, but that's, obviously wasn't.
Yeah, that's the
you know, so
next movies that deal with that sort of thing.
I figured, and then, like, Princess Leia, like, you know, didn't, like, get together with any of the guys. I thought it was going to be, like, this love story kind of thing, but it wasn't really like that. But I did find interesting that, like, Harrison Ford's character with Carrie Fisher, like, how he was kind of sarcastic and, like, looking out for himself, and they kind of had this argumentative kind of, you know, relationship, but they really actually liked each other. You know what I mean? That kind of whole thing was the same as his character usually is in the Indiana Jones franchise. So, like, he has that little, smirk and the, like, sarcasm and the kind of argumentative repertoire with the woman character. Like, it was, like, the same kind of thing. So, I thought that was kind of cute, because I always was a fan of Harrison Ford. So, anyway, that was interesting. I had no idea, like, they were, like, real humans in this. I thought everybody was, like, supposed to be some kind of, like, space creature. So, I thought that was kind of a cute part. And I really liked the droid characters. I don't even know that other one, the, like, gold guy was, like, CP3 or something.
C3PO.
I don't know. C3PO. Yeah, he was, like, real, I'll say, talkative and a little R2-D2. I thought they were kind of cute together. Like, the unlikely couple, But, yeah. So, it was interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, alright, well, I'll get into a plot synopsis now.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Alright, so we open with, they're in space, there's a smaller spaceship being chased down by a bigger spaceship. Well, there's the opening crawl first, and then that happens. And the larger spaceship boards the smaller one, and, this is the Empire and the Rebellion. The Rebellion has some sort of, like, message they're trying to get off of the ship onto, like, to send it to someone, and the Empire's trying to stop them. The Empire has Darth Vader, who's this, large menacing figure dressed in all black, has this, the famous breathing thing he does. And he goes in and tries to, like, intercept the plan. So he meets Princess Leia, and she's, like, they have this whole back and forth. She gets captured, but before that happens, she sends off the message to Obi-Wan Kenobi with the droids, and they get on a escape pod and shoot down to the desert planet of Tatooine. And realizing this, the Empire sends their troops after them, so they're trying to go from the desert, the middle of the desert, to find the person they're looking for. And they go on a bit of a journey. They end up getting captured by these little gremlin-looking guys who are droid sellers. So that happens. We end up with the droid seller, like the little gremlin-looking guys selling the droids to Luke and his uncle, Luke Skywalker. And so they get the droids, and they're, like, he's a moisture farmer, I believe.
Yeah, I didn't understand what that meant.
I think it's just supposed, because they're on a desert, it's like supposed to be like a sci-fi sort of farm equivalent. He's a farmer. That's like what you're supposed to take away from it.
The farmer. Yeah.
And he wants to go out on adventures. He wants to be a pilot, but his parents are like, well, not his parents, his uncle and aunt are like, oh, what if you stayed here and helped us with the farm and then went later, actually? And he's like, no, I want to go now.
Yeah.
So his friends have already gone. He's a young boy, he longs for adventure. I guess he's not a boy. He's like 18 or something. I don't know.
Yeah, a young adult.
Yes, and he's talking to these droids he just got, and R2-D2, the little blue guy, is, he removes his, whatever it's called, it stops him from being able to move around freely, but he removes that, and then R2-D2's, like, accidentally plays the message meant for Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he's like, I don't know any Obi-Wans, but I know a Ben Kenobi, he's an old man that lives around here. And so, R2-D2 later wanders off, and Luke decides to go after him. And they end up finding Obi-Wan Kenobi, who calls himself Ben, for some reason.
I thought that was funny, yeah. Like, shortened.
And he knows Luke's father, or he knew Luke's father. He introduces to him, like, the Force and the Jedi, and, like, I fought with your father, and here's his lightsaber, his special laser sword weapon. And Luke's all like, wow, that's super cool. Why don't we go join the rebellion? And
yeah.
Like, because they clearly need help, because that's the message. You're my only hope, Obi-Wan. And they're like, sure. They go off, and realize, like, they try to, like, go off to town, and they realize that the stormtroopers have been coming through, and they've been tracking down the droids, and they found out where they got sold to. So Luke realizes, oh no, they've tracked down to my uncle and aunt's house, and so he goes out there, and they've been killed. And he's like, okay, well, I guess...
Not only killed, but, like, charred.
Yeah.
In fire, it looked like.
So he's like, okay, well, I guess I have to go to Alderaan to join the rebellion now. There's nothing left for me here. So they go do that. They end up in the city area, and they go into a bar because they need transportation, so they go in there to try to find transportation, and there's a bunch of weird aliens. And then they meet Han Solo. He was a smuggler and works for crime boss, I guess, is the idea there.
Yeah.
And they're like, we need passage off planet. And he's like, oh, it's gonna cost you. And he's like, okay, we'll pay you. We don't have much up front, but we'll pay you when we get there. And so they do that. They go with, well, the stormtroopers catch up with them. They end up in like a mad dash shootout to like try to get off planet and escape them before the stormtroopers catch them, because they realize they have the droids. So they're going to escape, and like while they're in the ship, Luke is doing some Jedi training thing with Obi-Wan, and you know, that's like, it shows some of the like force powers. He can put on like a blindfold and still deflect the blasters through using the force. And during this, you know, Leia's being interrogated. They're trying to find out like where the rebel base is. She won't tell them. Oh, I forgot to mention the Death Star. Yeah, they have this big like planet-sized weapon called the Death Star that's like this giant spaceship. It has a giant laser. They use the giant laser to blow up a planet.
So rude.
Yeah.
Can't believe they did that.
Yeah, basically just as like a show of force to, and whatnot. So, as they're going to Alderaan, it's like, turns out, like, they're like, we're in the coordinates, but there's nothing here. And then they're like, maybe we should go to that moon. And it's like, oh, that's not a moon, that's a giant spaceship. They get pulled into it, and now our group of heroes is on the Death Star, and Obi-Wan decides, okay, I'm gonna go release y'all from, like, go find the way to shut off the tractor beam to release y'all so y'all can escape. And they realize, you know, they go out and are doing things, and they realize the rest of them do, and they realize, oh, Princess Leia is being held prisoner here, let's go rescue her. So they do that. They go on this, like,
yeah,
kind of, like, where they disguise as stormtroopers, and they have a, you know, they go through and they try to find where she's located. They end up being discovered, so then they're in a, like, sort of rush to get away, and so they do that. They find her, they escape, they end up in a trash compactor, they narrowly escape that, and on their way back, Darth Vader, you know, the menacing Empire figure guy, and Obi-Wan Kenobi meet. It turns out they have some sort of history. Darth Vader used to be Obi-Wan's apprentice, and they have a duel, and as the others are escaping in Han's ship, Obi-Wan surrenders himself to Darth Vader, and then he sort of, like, disappears, like his robe just goes and his body's not there anymore. And Luke sees this and he's all upset, but they get off and escape. Then they end up with the rebels, and they're like, okay, we got the information, the plans we wanted, now we can use this to make an assault on the Death Star. And there's a whole scene where they are, well, so Han is like, I'm not gonna do that, you know, I care about myself and getting paid, I don't care about your rebellion, I'm gonna go off by myself. And they're upset because they thought, you know, oh, you should help us, you're a good pilot. So they have their whole Death Star fight, that you said goes on for, you thought, too long. And
yeah, that was a little much.
Obi-Wan comes back as a ghost and is telling Luke, use the Force and whatnot, you know, to trust in the Force to make the shot. They have to make this really tight shot into, like, one particular part of the Death Star. in order to blow it up, and he ends up, like, he's in a dogfight, and he's, like, trying to run down, and, Han Solo comes back. He decided, oh, he's actually going to help. And he comes back and he shoots, like, he ends up giving Luke the room to make the final attack. And he does that, and the Death Star blows up, and everybody's happy. And then we end with a medal ceremony where they get medals. I forgot to mention Chewbacca. That's
like
Han
Olympics.
Solo's friend and co-pilot.
Yeah, Chewbacca. He was pretty funny. I like the noises he made. Yes, so this movie was like nothing I've ever seen. I felt very like unprepared. Like I thought I had this idea in my head what it was about, but it was totally wrong. Like I had no idea there were all these like crazy space creatures, and it was very interesting. So I was just kind of going like, what? This movie is crazy. Like, it's insane. Like, how do you think of all this stuff, you know, as a person writing it?
So that's actually an interesting point. This movie's famous, I guess famous isn't the right term, but it's known for being, like, very much a product of its influences. Like, I don't know the full, like, story behind that, but, like, yeah, a lot of people point out, like, I think Flash Gordon is one of them, which is like an old serial comic strip something. And it's pulling on a lot of like, it's pulling on a bit of like samurai movies from, you know, the years past.
Yeah.
And it's...
I can see that.
Kind of got some like of the, you know, pulp novels and sci-fi novels of that like previous era in it. And a bit of, like, fantasy stuff, too, with, like, the, you know, the, like, Jedi and whatnot. And you've got a bit of, like, World War II sort of stories in it, with, like, you know, Luke's a farmer who wants to be a fighter pilot. And the, you know, Empire and Rebellion sort of thing.
That reference. Yeah, and to me, I thought it was interesting, and Travis actually pointed this out, my husband, that, like, he was saying that the Darth Vader's, like, troops, I forget what they're called, but that they, yes, well, and not only that, but the people who were sitting around the table, like, making the decisions, but he's like, they look like Nazis.
Yeah,
like,
that was
they're kind of dressed
deliberate.
like you would see. Yeah, and so that's what I was like, it had to be, like, a reference to that, like, Darth Vader's, like, the evil, you know, the evil one, like, Hitler and his followers are, like, Nazis, you know? And so, like, I caught, like, those kinds of references, but I, you know, not having a background in, like, looking at a lot of sci-fi stuff, I was just kind of like, whoa, like, it's definitely, like, very imaginative, and, it was super interesting to me, just, like, coming at it from, you know, a place with no real references to it, so, but I definitely got that, and I just thought it was such an interesting movie, but it didn't end, like I said, in the way that I thought that it would. Like, it was kind of cool, like, okay, they, like, killed the Death Star thing, and, you know, but then it was, like, you had these questions, like, well, did Obi-Wan, did he, like, die, or did he, like, you know, become part of the Force, or, you know what I mean? Like, there's just so many questions that, like, I guess probably get answered in some subsequent movies, but...
Yep.
It was just very, just kind of like question marks.
So, yeah, I think you're hitting on something that when I rewatched it, like, really, like, it really clicked for me why Star Wars became a phenomenon, like, watching this movie. Like, you mentioned the questions, or, like, it has all this weird stuff that I think not just for, like, direct sequel sort of stuff, like, what's going on with the Rebellion and Empire, like, what's going on with our characters, like, how are they going to interact, what's, like, the Force and all that, but, like, broader, like, sort of world-building questions that people can write books and stuff on, like, you know, when they go into the bar and there's all those aliens, and it's like, what's the deal with those guys, you know, and all the, like, Jedi stuff, and, like, when Obi-Wan is talking to Luke, and he's like, you know, I fought with your father in the Clone Wars. Like, what's that? You know, I think a lot of people grabbed onto that, and they wanted more. Like, I feel like a lot of this movie gives little, like, morsels of information that people really clinged on to and wanted to know more about.
Yeah, I think you're like spot on that, because the whole time I was watching, I was like, there are so many references here, like to like different things, like you're saying, like, okay, Jabba and his like drug lord ways, and the Clone Wars, and the Force and the Jedi, and all these wacky aliens, and like the Sand People, and like Stormtroopers. Like, it was like, so, to me, there were so many different little things that I honestly had a little bit of trouble keeping up. Like, I was just like, wait, who is that? What is this? Like, what, like I said, there were so many, intricate details that it definitely made room for like subsequent movies, and even like the prequels that came later, that I was just kind of going, how do you keep all this straight? And I know there are a lot of like diehard Star Wars people out there. And, I've heard recently like The Mandalorian was really good. And like, I just have no idea about any of that. But I can definitely see like there were just so many little details that I was like, wait, is this like a good force, a bad force? Like, what are we doing, And I also thought it was interesting that, that they talked about the Force as a religion. I just thought that was like an interesting aspect of it. And it kind of, it makes you automatically think of those parallels with religion, and how people think of God as this force. And, anyway, it was like that was like a whole different, layer that you could like, look into later on in other movies. So I thought that was very interesting. Like I said, I thought, okay, now I don't know if this is right, but that Luke Skywalker eventually gets with Princess Leia. Is that right?
No.
Because it seemed like she was kind of like in Han Solo.
Okay, yeah, do you want me to spoil? Do you care?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Okay, so
I would probably forget anyway.
So this is a common theme sort of with this series, as they were making a lot of stuff up as they go along, like that Luke, I am your father thing. Like that wasn't, I mean, maybe it was in like people's, like maybe George Lucas had thought of that when he made the first film, but that wasn't like, on the first film. And Leia is Luke's sister, which they hadn't like planned out at that point. So they kind of have this love triangle going on, which is worse in the next movie. That they're later like, oh, they're siblings.
Well, it was kind of funny because you could tell like Luke is kind of shown as this inexperienced, very young, naive adult kind of thing. Like that Princess Leia wouldn't even be interested in him. You know what I mean? And she had this like kind of, not necessarily flirty, but this like, kind of back and forth with Han. So, and I actually thought his name was Hans, but it's just Han, right?
Yep.
Yeah, very interesting. Mm-hmm.
He's not from Die Hard.
Yeah, I kept thinking of that, Hans. So, that was definitely one of those things. And then one thing that I thought was interesting too was when Darth Vader was talking, I was like, oh, that sounds like, James Earl Jones.
Yep.
And at the end, I saw the credits, but then it had like 6 or 7 people listed as like his voice.
Huh.
And I was like, wait, why are there so many people? Like, I don't understand.
So he had a different like actor than the voice actor.
Oh, maybe that's why.
Yeah.
But it had like several people listed, and I'm going like, what is that? I gotta look more into that part. So, and I'm one of those people who always watches the credits. Like, I like to see like who's involved in what. I don't know why. But I was like, that's so crazy. So it was him, his voice, at least. But several other people had a part in it, so I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But he's got one of those voices that you can, like, very distinct.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. But what's with the mouth breathing? Like, why he do that breathy?
It's touched on in the later films, but he's, like, he has a lot of robotic parts to him. Like, he gets injured and has to, like, have a, like, whole breather apparatus.
I was like, does he have asthma? Like, what's up with this? Like, it's terrible. Get that man an inhaler. Yeah.
But yeah, that's very iconic, his breathing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, now I can understand a little bit more. Like, I see, like, when people go to, like, I guess it's like Universal Studios or something, like around Disney World, and they post, like, videos and pictures, like, on Facebook and stuff. I'm always, like, going, what the heck? You know how they have those big Star Wars?
Yeah, that's at
like,
Disney World.
I don't
They have
know.
a new Star Wars, since
Okay,
Disney bought
World. Yes. Okay, so I see that, yeah, that makes more sense. I see people, like, showing these pictures of, like, their kids playing with, like, I don't know, these, like, actors and, I guess, like, Jedi people. I don't even know. But I was just kind of, like, going, I don't get this. Like, what is this about? So, at least now I have a little bit of a reference. I still am, like, having trouble following, like, everything. But like I said, I think I need to rewatch it because, like, the whole movie, I was probably driving Travis crazy because I was like, what? what is that? You don't want to watch movies with me. I'm, like, so annoying. But anyway, I was just kind of laughing at that, like, okay, now I get this stuff. And so I think I told you one time about a wedding that I went to for my coworker where she surprised her husband, like, at the reception. And, like, they had people dressed as stormtroopers came out and, like, danced with everybody. And I just thought it was, like, the cutest, like, because it was, like, very, like, a personal, you know, personalized wedding. And I thought it was just funny, but at the same time, I was like, I don't really get this. Like, why would you have stormtrooper? You know, like, I didn't understand what stormtroopers were. So, but I thought it was, like, a fun, you know, just, like, a funny thing. So now I understand a little more. But aren't they the bad ones? Like,
Yes.
why would you want stormtroopers?
Yeah, they're the bad guys, and they're
you know?
kind of based off of Nazis, so...
Yeah, I was kind of going, that's interesting. But, yeah, but it was funny, you know. Anyway, everybody had a good time but at the wedding. But I was just kind of going like, wait a minute, these are the bad guys. But I don't know, maybe they're known for partying. I have no idea.
Yeah, that's become a thing since a lot of people like dancing stormtroopers. Like, there's a whole, like, cosplay group that goes around and, like, does events. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, imagine that's your job. Like, you dress up like a stormtrooper and just go dance. Like, how awesome is that? But, okay, so please tell me about this whole, like, movie franchise. Like, how many are there? I feel like there's, like, 10 of them.
Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna get into that. So, after this comes out, there's a trilogy, which that's why it gets renamed, because Lucas decides, okay, well, I'm gonna make a prequel trilogy at some point. I don't know, like, when this happens exactly, but so it goes from Star Wars to Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope.
Right.
And then later he goes back, and then I think the first one comes out in 99. So in the, like, late 90s, early 2000s, he makes the prequel trilogy, and so that happens, and then later on, like 10 years later, he sells it to Disney, and Disney makes their own trilogy set after the original one, and they've also made 2 spin-off movies, I want to say.
Wow, okay.
And yeah, that's the movies.
So interesting. Wow, so there really are, like, what, 9 of them?
Yeah,
Is that,
and there's a bunch of
did I count
TV
that
shows and games and books and comics,
Wow.
and when Disney bought it, they reset the, like, canon. So there's, like, an old canon from all the old books and games and stuff, and a new one that keeps some of the old stuff, but not all of it, and has new stuff added.
What is that? What is, like, canon? What does that mean?
Oh God, you
Sorry.
I didn't even think that wouldn't be something that would. So, like, biblical
Like,
canon.
it sounds familiar.
Like, are you familiar with that?
Like, a little familiar, but how is that for a movie? Like,
well,
I don't-
biblical canon
I don't
is like
understand.
these books are considered, you know, official parts of the Bible. These other ones aren't, because
Right,
there's
but-
like apocryphal books that claim to be from.
Right. No, I get that, but, like, how does that... So, like, you're saying they reset it
Yes.
for the franchise?
So canon is
they
like
said,
what
okay,
is
these are
what is
official
considered
ones?
to be part of the whole, like, franchise. So, you know, the movies and
Oh,
books.
so they reset it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when Disney bought it, they decided, okay, we're gonna cut ties with what was considered, you know, part of the franchise previously and go on our own path.
because they bought it and then they decided to do their own thing. That makes more sense. Because I'm going like, how can they say this isn't part of it or this is?
Because that means
I guess they can do whatever they want.
Future stories won't, like, consider, I don't know any of the titles of the books, but won't consider this book to be part of the story or whatever.
Wow. Okay, so this has got to be, like, one of the longest running, like, I don't want to say series, but I guess franchises, right?
I have no idea. I have no idea how you even, like, does Sherlock Holmes count?
Oh, I guess so. Yeah, you're right.
There's nothing from the original author, but, like, and a lot of it's just adaptations.
Yeah.
But, like, you know, there's not a direct continuous line there, but, you know, Sherlock Holmes is much older, and people still make stuff with Sherlock Holmes in it.
Well, yeah, and if you get into all the comics and stuff, you know, like we kind of talked about
Superman.
in a different podcast.
He's old.
I guess that would be,
Lord of the Rings is older than Star Wars.
He's old. Yeah, that's true. But it seems like Star Wars has been this huge success, and it's still super popular. Like, even with kids, I guess because of the Disney, you know, if they came out with these other ones, like, even with young kids, they're, like, all into Star Wars. And I'm going, like, what did I miss here? Like, I've gone my whole life without ever seeing any of these films. Like, what am I missing? But I also think it's funny that, like, of course, like, my whole generation is sarcastic. Look at what we watch. Like, every movie and every show and everything, like, featured these, like, very sarcastic characters. I'm like, that must be where I get my sarcasm from. But I just think it's very interesting that, like, older folks, like, who first saw this in 1977 down to, like, young children love this whole thing. And it was just, like, kind of a blank for me. Like, I was like, okay, what am I missing here? Now, I will say, unpopular opinion, I wasn't especially super interested in watching all of them after watching the first one. I was kind of like, okay, like, I kind of get it now. I don't know that I'm going to go through all of these.
Yeah, it's a lot of movies.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know about this. Like, I'm not really into sci-fi too much, although, like, you know, Back to the Future, it was, like, one of those movies that I'll love and I'll still watch if I see it on somewhere, you know? But, that's, like, as sci-fi as I get, you know? So it was cool, it was interesting, it was very, very creative, but I was just kind of like, I don't know that I want to watch any more of these. I don't know, what do you think? Is it worth, like...
If you're not interested in it, I would say no. It's a lot of movies and, like... Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's almost overwhelming.
Yeah, not all of them are good, so...
Yeah, like, I texted my friend last night. I was like, I'm watching the first Star Wars. Like, you know, I've never seen it. And she's like, well, they do get better. You know, I was like, okay.
People tend to like the first movie. I mean, I don't know, like, what the...
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the consensus is that the first movie's good, though.
Well, it's like the OG.
Yeah.
Like, of course you have to like that one. Like, you know, and I didn't think it was bad. It just, like, was kind of going, okay, I saw it. That's cool. You know?
Yeah.
I get some stuff now, like, after all these years. I can understand
for me, I find this movie more interesting. Like, I find this movie more interesting as, like, a piece of history than I do, like, as a film itself.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Because I did think, like, wow, this plot is, like, all over the place. For me, you know, like...
Yeah, I think it's fine. It's just, like, it's not anything, spectacular. It does what it, you know, it does what it set out to do. It's decent. The actors are doing good. And...
Yeah!
I think you can see why people latched onto it so well, but it's fine.
Yeah. Well... So, you know what I thought was also kind of cool is, like, some of the, like, special effects. And I'm thinking, like, how did they do that back in 1977? You know, like, some stuff looked like CGI. And I'm going, like, I don't think that technology was around then. Like, how did they do that?
Okay, so
do you know?
It depends on what you mean by special effects, because the original film was all like practical. It was all like no computer generated anything.
Right.
But the version that you will find on Disney Plus, and like if you buy a DVD, that's what like all the like modern versions you get are the special edition of the film, which was released, I think, in the 90s?
Okay, that makes so much more sense. Because I was going, like, some of this stuff, like, even, like, the backgrounds or, like, the dinosaur-looking creatures that they would, like, ride. I was like, this kind of looks like, computer-generated. Like, how did they do this?
So, yes, 20 years after the original, they released a special edition, which is now the version you see that introduced a lot of stuff. So that's the version you see now if you try to look it up, and it's not impossible to find the old version. Obviously, it's Star Wars. People have taken, like, the prints that were out, like, I think from the VHS, and you can go find those, but, like, legally, there is no, like, way to do that.
I got you. So that makes so much more sense, because I'm sitting there going, how the heck did they do this in the 70s? Like, I do not understand, because it definitely looked good. I was like, wow, this is kind of crazy, like, that they could do this. So that makes a whole lot more sense now.
I mean, some of the stuff you're talking about might be practical effects, though. Like, Star Wars is a very, like, covered film, so if you want to, like, find, like, how they did something, that's probably out there if you, like, look it up.
Yeah. That's super cool, though, because it was kind of like, how they could come up with ways to show these things that they did. It was all, sci-fi. It's all, like, kind of crazy stuff that they had to create. So I think that really shows the talent, and the skills that they had to do all of that.
Right, and because I think, like, some of the backgrounds were painted, and they would, like, shoot in front of, like, paintings, or especially, like, all the aliens and stuff are costumes and stuff like that.
Yeah. I gotta say, I didn't notice in the credits who played Chewbacca.
Oh, I forget his name.
I gotta look that one up. Just curious. Thought that was kind of funny. It's very interesting. I like how all these different species were, like, interacting together.
Peter Mayhew? I don't know if you know him from anywhere else.
Oh. No.
Okay.
Not really.
Apparently he's best known for playing Chewbacca, so...
I mean, I'm sure, like, back in the day that was, like, the big thing.
Yeah.
It's funny. I want to talk to, like, an older person now who, like, saw this, like, as a kid in the 70s, late 70s, and see what they thought of it at the time,
Yeah, so speaking of the special edition, though, what do you feel about that? Because it's actually very controversial. There's a lot of, like, Star Wars fans and, like, film people, whatever you call them.
I could see how it could be controversial, because I think, like, I mean, you have your, like, OGs that want to keep it OG, right? And I think it could be, like, really interesting to watch the original and just to see, like, how it was done at that time as it was meant to be shown at that time. On the other hand, I definitely think it makes it more, when they remaster it or whatever you call it, it makes it more interesting for people, like, for kids and stuff now to use, like, the more modern technology, because you know how, like, some kids, when they're watching some old movie or show, they're like, oh my gosh, this is so goofy looking, So I think it makes it more relatable to a wider audience now. But I can definitely see, like, the hardcore, Star Wars people wanting to keep the original. But, I mean, I feel like they should have them both available.
Yeah, I feel like for the sake of film history, they should both be available. Like, the original should be available.
I totally agree. Yes. Like, Disney Plus should have original and special edition. You know what I mean? Like, I don't see why they want to totally make it inaccessible.
Some people also think the additions are worse. Like, there's two in particular. So the scene where Han is talking to Jabba the Hutt, that was originally an outtake from the first movie where Jabba was being played by a human, and George Lucas put it back in the special edition using CG to make Jabba the big worm guy he was in the later movies. And the scene where Han Solo is talking to one of Jabba's agents, and he's like, I don't have the money right now, and then he shoots him.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed this, but there's actually 2 shots going off there.
Oh, no.
And that's like a little... okay, see, like, that's a little, like, quirk they added in the edit so that it looks like Han Solo didn't shoot first, like, unprompted, to try to make him look better, I guess? Like, more of a good guy?
Interesting. Okay.
And people really didn't like that.
See.
But what's weird to me is that's like, that part goes really fast and it's hard to tell, but they still, like, beforehand have the shot of him, reaching and pulling out his gun.
Right.
So the effect's still the same. It's just, it's weird.
I don't. So George Lucas, like, was involved with this, like, the redo of it. And I can see, like, as a creator, like, sometimes wanting to, like, okay, well, let's do it this way this time. I don't know. I think it's part of the creative process. But I definitely understand, like, staying true to its roots and, keeping it as real as, well, I would say real, it's sci-fi, but keeping it as close to the original as possible.
Yeah. But
I can definitely see being a creator, like, wanting to kind of, let's change this part. Let's do this better, So I think that's kind of cool. But I absolutely think they should have both of them available.
Yeah.
Keep everybody happy,
Yeah.
Well, so I think we have exhausted the topic of Star Wars Episode 4. Okay, well, we've exhausted it for today. We could go on and on about this.
Yeah.
But I thought it was an interesting movie. I would never have watched it if you hadn't encouraged me to. So again, as usual, like, you are always encouraging me to step out of my cinematic comfort zone and try new things. So I always appreciate that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, wow.
So that concludes our Beach View podcast today, and we hope you enjoyed it and join us next time. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.